Dog gives birth to deformed puppies. What happened next broke everyone. It starts as a routine morning at a quiet animal clinic until a scrappy stray collapses at the door, giving birth to a litter of deformed puppies, tiny lives hanging by a thread. Shock, grief, and disbelief flood the room. But the real danger isn't over. What seems like an isolated tragedy quickly unravels a dark secret lurking in the water and soil around town. Chemicals, corruption, and powerful forces begin to surface, threatening anyone who dares to uncover the truth. As the investigation escalates, loyal allies step forward, betrayals are revealed, and the stakes climb higher than anyone could imagine. Lives are put at risk, moral choices are tested, and the very safety of the innocent hangs in the balance. How far will one determined caretaker go to protect the vulnerable? And what will happen when she faces a powerful enemy willing to destroy everything to keep their secrets buried? The answers are shocking, heartbreaking, and unforgettable. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Hollis Mercer's small veterinary clinic, casting warm stripes across the freshly mopped linoleum floor. She breathed in the familiar scent of antiseptic and pet shampoo, savoring the quiet before her first appointment. These peaceful moments were rare in her practice. A sharp whimper shattered the silence. Hollis rushed to the front door, her heart racing. There, collapsed on the welcome mat, lay a golden-brown mixed breed dog, her swollen belly heaving with labored breaths. The dog's fur was matted and dirty, but her eyes held a desperate trust as she looked up at Hollis. "Oh, sweetie," Hollis murmured, kneeling beside her. "Let's get you inside." The dog's collar was worn leather, with a tarnished tag that read, "Marigold." As Hollis gently helped the dog to her feet, she noticed how thin she was beneath the pregnancy. Inside the exam room, Hollis's practiced hands moved quickly over Marigold's belly. The contractions were strong and close together. "You're doing great, girl," she soothed. But something felt off. The positioning seemed wrong, and Marigold's temperature was concerning. The first puppy came with a rush of fluid. Hollis's smile of relief froze as she cleared the membrane from its face. Her stomach turned. The puppy's head was grotesquely misshapen, its jaw twisted at an impossible angle. Its tiny legs were bent and malformed. "No, no, no," she whispered, working to clear its airways. The puppy gave a weak cry, but its breathing was shallow and irregular. The second puppy followed quickly. Hollis's hands shook as she saw the same devastating deformities, a spine that curved unnaturally, paws that were fused together. The third puppy was just as badly affected, its body so twisted that Hollis had to fight back tears as she cleaned it. Marigold whined softly, trying to reach her babies. Hollis helped them nurse, though their malformed mouths made it difficult. She picked up her phone, fingers hovering over the county vet's number. Dr. Patterson was more experienced, but he was also quick to judge. Would he think she had missed something? Done something wrong? The bell over the front door chimed. "Hello? Dr. Mercer?" It was Mrs. Henderson, early for her cat's checkup. "Be right there," Hollis called, her voice cracking. She couldn't hide this. In a town this size, word would spread like wildfire. Mrs. Henderson's gasp echoed through the clinic when she peeked into the exam room. "Oh my word! What happened to those poor things?" "I don't know yet," Hollis admitted, trying to keep her voice steady. They were born this way." Within hours, the whispers started. Hollis heard them as she stepped out to grab supplies from the pharmacy. "Never seen anything like it in all my years," from old Mr. Collins. Maybe if she'd called for help sooner, from Sarah at the grocery store. Back at the clinic, Hollis set up a warming station for the puppies, monitoring their vital signs. Marigold watched with worried eyes, her maternal instinct strong despite her exhaustion. The smallest puppy struggled to breathe, its deformed chest barely rising. "I won't give up on you," Hollis promised them all, drawing up tiny doses of pain medication. Her mind raced with possibilities: environmental toxins, genetic disorders, infections during pregnancy. Something had caused this, and she needed to find out what. The phone rang. Dr. Patterson. Someone had already called him. Hollis stared at the phone, her finger trembling over the answer button. This could make or break her reputation in town. But more importantly, these puppies needed every chance they could get. She picked up the phone, her voice firm despite her fears. "Dr. Patterson, I was just about to call you. I could use your input on something unusual." The puppy's labored breathing filled the silence of the exam room as Hollis waited for his response, knowing that this morning's events would change everything. She looked at Marigold, who had dragged herself closer to nuzzle her struggling babies, and knew she couldn't back down now. These deformities weren't natural, and someone had to find out why they happened. Mrs. Henderson had already texted half the town. Through the clinic's window, Hollis could see people slowing their cars to peer inside, their faces a mix of horror and curiosity. But she didn't care about their judgment now. All that mattered were the 4 lives in front of her, counting on her to make the right decisions. Dr. Patterson's voice crackled through the phone, distant and formal. "I'm quite backed up today, Hollis. Surely you can handle a difficult birth." "This isn't just a difficult birth," Hollis replied, watching the smallest puppy struggle for each breath. "These deformities are severe, and I've never seen anything like it. I could really use your expertise." "Well." He paused, and Hollis could practically hear him, shuffling papers. "I might be able to stop by next week. Document everything carefully and—" "Next week?" Hollis's free hand clenched into a fist. "These puppies might not make it through the night. I need help now." "I'm sure you're doing everything possible," he said smoothly. "Sometimes nature just takes its course." The dismissal in his tone made her blood boil. She'd heard that same practiced indifference 20 years ago, when their family farm started losing livestock to mysterious illnesses. The county officials had shrugged it off until it was too late, until the chemical contamination had already poisoned their well water. Through the window, she spotted Mike from the feed store slowing his truck to a crawl, craning his neck to peer inside. Hollis moved to block his view, protecting Marigold and her puppies from the growing parade of gawkers. Sarah from the grocery store burst in, not even pretending to need veterinary services. "I heard the puppies were born with 2 heads, she exclaimed, trying to peek around Hollis. "That's not true," Hollis said firmly, guiding Sarah back toward the door. "And I need to focus on my patients right now." "Well, I heard that Stray's been drinking from Miller's irrigation ditch," Sarah continued. "Everyone knows that water's not right. Smells funny since they started that new fertilizer program." Hollis froze. "Miller's ditch? The one behind the old factory?" "Saw her there myself, lapping away." Sarah nodded eagerly, pleased to have Hollis's attention. "Told my Henry, that can't be good for her." After ushering Sarah out, Hollis returned to the exam room, her mind racing. The irrigation ditch ran past several industrial properties. She'd noticed changes in the local wildlife patterns lately. Fewer birds nesting, missing frogs in the creek. She'd dismissed it as normal fluctuation. But now, the smallest puppy let out a weak cry. Hollis grabbed her medical journal and began documenting everything. Measurements, photographs, detailed descriptions of each deformity. Her hand shook as she sketched the malformations, remembering how her father's hands had trembled as he showed government inspectors their dying cattle. Her phone buzzed with text messages from concerned clients and nosy neighbors. "Is it true? Should we be worried about our pets?" Maybe you should have called for help sooner." Hollis set the phone aside. The county vet wouldn't help. The town was already dividing into camps of support and suspicion. She looked at Marigold, who was trying so hard to care for her broken babies, and made her decision. She pulled out her old laptop and began researching similar cases, environmental factors, industrial chemicals that could cause birth defects. Her father had taught her that sometimes you had to be your own advocate, your own investigator, your own authority. "I won't let them brush this off," she promised Marigold, who watched her with trusting eyes. "We're going to find out what happened to your babies, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else's." She glanced at the wall of certificates that were supposed to give her credibility in this town. They hadn't helped her father. They wouldn't help her now. This would come down to determination, evidence, and the courage to stand alone if necessary. Hollis pulled up a map of the local waterways on her computer, marking Marigold's likely path, noting every potential contamination source. She'd need water samples, soil tests, documentation of any other affected animals. The scope of the investigation was daunting, but the alternative, doing nothing, wasn't an option. Through the window, she could see small groups gathering, pointing, whispering. Let them talk. She had work to do. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the clinic windows when the bell above the door chimed. Hollis looked up from her paperwork to see August Runnels filling the doorframe, his tailored suit as crisp as his calculated smile. "Miss Mercer," he said, stepping inside with the confidence of someone used to owning every room he entered. "I heard about your unfortunate situation with the puppies." Hollis straightened, immediately on guard. August's company, Midwest Agricultural Solutions, was the largest employer in the county. His charitable donations plastered his name across half the buildings in town. "Mr. Runnels," she replied carefully. "What can I do for you?" He pulled out a checkbook, gold pen catching the light. "I thought perhaps I could do something for you. Our community foundation would like to offer assistance with your medical expenses for these poor creatures." The smallest puppy whimpered from its incubator, drawing August's attention. His expression flickered. Was it concern or calculation in his eyes? "That's very generous," Hollis said, "but I couldn't accept—" "I insist," he began writing. "We take our responsibility to the community very seriously. Although I hope you understand that such unfortunate incidents, when publicized without proper context, can cause unnecessary panic." The implied threat hung in the air between them. Hollis felt her jaw tighten. "What context would that be, Mr. Runnels?" "Natural mutations occur all the time," he said smoothly. "Drawing hasty conclusions or making accusations without evidence could damage reputations, yours included. I'm sure you understand." Before Hollis could respond, Ridge Callahan walked in, toolbox in hand. He'd promised to fix her broken heating unit, but his timing couldn't have been better. Ridge's solid presence seemed to fill the space, matching August's imposing stature. "Everything okay in here?" Ridge asked, his voice quiet but firm. August's smile didn't waver. "Just offering some community support." He tore out the check and placed it on the counter. "Think about what I said, Miss Mercer. Sometimes it's better to let nature take its course." After he left, Ridge set down his toolbox. That man could make a summer day feel cold. "He's worried," Hollis said, ripping the check in half. "Which means I'm probably looking in the right direction." Ridge leaned against the counter. "County commissioner called me this morning, asked if I could talk some sense into you. Said you were causing unnecessary concern." "And what did you say?" "Told him I trust your judgment more than his." Ridge's eyes met hers. "What do you need?" Hollis hesitated, then pulled out her map. "I need to test the water in these locations, but I can't leave the puppies alone for that long." Show me where, Ridge said without hesitation. I'll get your samples. They spent the next hour marking locations and reviewing proper collection procedures. Ridge's practical questions helped clarify her thoughts. Where exactly had people seen Marigold? Which drainage patterns could have carried contaminants? What other animals might have been affected? The clinic phone rang, the county veterinarian again. Hollis, I've been hearing concerning reports, he began. Listen, you're relatively new here. You don't want to create problems where there aren't any. 3 puppies with severe birth defects isn't a problem. These things happen. We don't want to alarm people unnecessarily. The proper channels are saying exactly what you're saying, Hollis cut in. That I should keep quiet and let it go. Why is everyone so eager to sweep this under the rug? I'm trying to help you, he said, his voice hardening. Don't damage your reputation over this. After hanging up, Hollis found her hands shaking. Ridge watched her with concern. They're all connected, she said. The county vet, the commissioner, August Runnels. They're closing ranks. Then we work smart, Ridge replied. I know people who've worked at that plant, people who've seen things they couldn't report. Let me make some calls. Hollis looked at him gratefully. Why are you helping me? Because you're right, he said simply, and because someone needs to stand up to August Runnels and his crowd. Might as well be us. The bell chimed again. Sarah from the grocery store bustled in, this time with actual purpose. Hollis, you should know. My cousin works at the county office. She says they're talking about reviewing your veterinary license, claiming you're causing public panic. Hollis felt the weight of it all pressing down. The threats, the pressure, the sick puppies fighting for life in their incubators. But looking at Ridge's steady presence and Sarah's concerned face, she realized she wasn't alone. Thank you for telling me, she said to Sarah. Would you be willing to keep your ears open? The more we know about what they're planning? Sarah nodded firmly. Count on it. My Henry's still sick from working at that plant last year. Nobody ever proved anything, but... She squared her shoulders. Time somebody did. As Sarah left, Ridge started unpacking his tools. I'll fix that heating unit now. Then we'll figure out our next steps. They're scared, Hollis. That means you're on to something. Hollis checked on the puppies, her resolve strengthening. August Runnels might have money and influence, but she had something he didn't. The truth. And she was starting to gather allies who weren't afraid to help her prove it. She grabbed her notebook and began listing names. Former plant workers, farmers who'd lost livestock, anyone who might have seen something. August had shown his hand today. Now she knew exactly what she was up against, and exactly how much she needed to prove. Ridge's truck bumped along the dirt road that bordered Runnels's property. Hollis gripped her sample collection kit, scanning the irrigation ditches that snaked through the fields. The morning sun cast long shadows across the farmland, making it easier to spot unusual discoloration in the water. Stop here, Hollis said, pointing to a culvert where several drainage channels merged. The water had an oily sheen that caught the light strangely. Ridge pulled over, keeping the engine running. I'll keep watch. Be quick about it. Hollis worked methodically, filling labeled containers with water samples and scraping soil from the bank into sterile bags. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but her mind raced. The water didn't just look wrong. It smelled wrong, too, a chemical tang that reminded her of the farm where she grew up. Someone's coming, Ridge called softly. Hollis quickly packed up her supplies, but instead of a security vehicle, a small blue sedan appeared. A woman with sharp features and determined eyes stepped out, holding up a press badge. Leona Park, Daily Chronicle, she introduced herself. I was hoping to find you out here. Hollis tensed, but Ridge moved closer, protective. How did you know where to look? Because I've been tracking similar cases across 3 counties, Leona replied, pulling out a folder. Birth defects in livestock, unexplained illnesses, all within a 10-mile radius of Runnels agricultural facilities. Hollis exchanged looks with Ridge. Show me. They spread the documents across Ridge's truck hood. Leona had photos, veterinary reports, and hand-drawn maps marking incident locations. These patterns aren't random, she explained, but everyone who's tried to investigate has been shut down or bought off. Like the county vet, Hollis muttered. Exactly. Leona's eyes gleamed with determination. But you're different. You've got evidence they can't ignore, and I've got the platform to make sure people hear about it. Ridge crossed his arms. It's not that simple. These people have power. That's why we need to work together, Leona insisted. I can protect my sources. I have contacts in the EPA, labs that can run independent tests. A distant engine sound made them all look up. Ridge quickly helped gather the documents while Hollis secured her samples. My office tonight, Hollis decided. 8 o'clock. Bring everything you've got. They separated quickly, taking different routes back to town. In her passenger seat, the sample containers clinked together with every bump in the road. Each one represented a piece of evidence, but also a risk. Hollis thought of the sick puppies, of Sarah's cousin Henry, of all the cases in Leona's file. The truth was bigger than she'd imagined. That evening, they gathered in Hollis's small office. Ridge brought coffee and his quiet strength, while Leona spread her research across the examination table. Maps and medical reports formed a paper trail of suspicion, but proving causation would be harder. The problem is access, Leona explained. We need samples from inside the facility, documentation of their chemical protocols, but security is tight, and whistleblowers are scared. I might know someone, Ridge offered. Former maintenance worker. He saw things that didn't sit right with him. Hollis studied the pattern of incidents Leona had mapped. These dates cluster around their testing periods. They're running trials of new formulas, but the containment isn't working. Or they don't care if it works, Leona added grimly. They worked late into the night, combining their knowledge. Hollis's veterinary expertise helped identify specific symptoms that could be traced to chemical exposure. Ridge's practical understanding of the town's infrastructure revealed likely contamination routes. Leona's investigative skills helped them organize the evidence into a compelling narrative. But challenges mounted quickly. When Hollis tried to send her first batch of samples to a state lab, the paperwork was mysteriously delayed. Ridge's contact at the plant suddenly decided to take an out-of-state job. Anonymous calls suggested that certain business licenses might face routine reviews. They're watching us, Ridge warned, after finding his truck's brake line suspiciously loose. Good, Leona said fiercely. Let them watch. Every attempt to stop us is another piece of evidence. Hollis felt the weight of leadership settling on her shoulders. These people were risking their livelihoods, maybe more, to help her expose the truth. She had to make sure their efforts counted. We need to be smarter, she decided. Split up the evidence, keep copies in different locations, document everything, every threat, every accident, every official who suddenly won't return our calls. They developed a system. Ridge installed security cameras around the clinic. Leona created encrypted backups of their files. They used burner phones and code words, met in different locations, kept their circle tight but effective. The pressure brought them closer together. Ridge's steady presence became something Hollis increasingly relied on. Leona's passionate determination matched her own. They were no longer just allies in an investigation. They were friends united against a common enemy. One evening, reviewing their progress, Hollis realized how far they'd come from that first morning when Marigold arrived. What started as one vet's concern about deformed puppies had grown into a coordinated investigation of corporate negligence and official corruption. We're getting close to something big, Leona said, highlighting another cluster of incidents on their map. They wouldn't fight this hard if we were wrong. Ridge nodded. Question is, how do we prove it before they stop us? Hollis looked at their growing wall of evidence, at the faces of her determined allies, at the photos of sick animals that drove their mission. We keep pushing, she said firmly. We keep documenting, keep collecting samples, keep connecting the dots. The truth is there. We just have to be strong enough to uncover it. The manila envelope shook in Hollis's hands as she read the lab report for the third time. Her stomach churned at the chemical names and their concentrations. Ridge leaned against her desk, his face grim as he processed the implications. Teratogenic compounds, Hollis said, her voice barely above a whisper. They've been banned for over a decade. The levels in these tissues. She swallowed hard. No wonder those puppies never had a chance. Ridge took the report, his weathered hands careful with the damning evidence. This matches the chemical signatures from Runnels' plant? Exactly. Hollis pulled out a map marked with sample locations. The highest concentrations are downstream from their discharge points. There's no other explanation. The office fell silent, except for the soft whir of the ceiling fan. Through the window, they could see Main Street, where people went about their normal day, unaware of the poison in their midst. We need to call Leona, Ridge said, reaching for his phone. Before he could dial, it rang. Leona's voice crackled with urgency. They're moving. Someone tipped off Runnels about the lab results. He's got his lawyers pressuring the state board to freeze all pending samples. Hollis's chest tightened. Can they do that? They're claiming improper collection procedures, potential contamination. It's nonsense, but they've got friends in high places. The board's already put a hold on processing new samples. Ridge's jaw clenched. What about the results we already have? Keep them safe, Leona warned. I'm hearing whispers about evidence tampering charges. They're trying to discredit everything. As if on cue, Hollis's office phone lit up. The county veterinary board wanted an emergency meeting about her unauthorized testing protocols. The local business association was reviewing her clinic's membership. Even the bank called about a routine audit of her business loan. They're trying to bury us in red tape, Hollis said, hanging up after the fourth call. Make us too busy fighting for our licenses to push the investigation. Ridge's phone buzzed with a text. His face darkened as he read it. My contact at the plant just quit. Says he's moving to Ohio. Effective immediately. They're scared, Hollis realized. All of them. The pressure mounted over the next few days. Downtown, Hollis noticed people avoiding her eyes. Longtime clients suddenly had scheduling conflicts. At the grocery store, conversation stopped when she walked down the aisle. Mrs. Peterson, whose cat Hollis had saved last winter, crossed the street rather than pass her on the sidewalk. It's not personal, she called back weakly. We just can't risk our business accounts. The isolation hurt, but the truth in those lab results kept Hollis going. Every number represented real harm to real animals, and maybe people too. She thought of Sarah's cousin Henry, born with similar deformities. How many others had been affected while Runnels's company denied responsibility? Ridge found her in the clinic late one night, reviewing their evidence for the 100th time. You need rest, he said softly. I need people to believe us. Hollis rubbed her tired eyes. Every day they stall is another day that poison spreads. They believe. They're just scared. Ridge's hand found her shoulder, steady and warm. Runnels employs half the town, directly or indirectly. His company's tentacles reach everywhere. Then we need to cut those tentacles. Hollis stood up suddenly. We have proof now, real, scientific proof. They can try to bury it, but the truth is right here in black and white. A rock crashed through the window, sending glass spraying across the floor. Ridge pulled Hollis away as another followed, along with a spray of red paint that spelled "liar" across the clinic's wall. They heard engines revving, then tires squealing as the vandals fled. Ridge started toward the door, but Hollis grabbed his arm. "Don't. That's what they want, to provoke us into doing something they can use against us." Instead, they photographed everything, called the police, and filed yet another report that would probably go nowhere. As they cleaned up the mess, more than glass needed mending. "Maybe I was wrong," Hollis said quietly. "Maybe I should have just treated those puppies and kept my mouth shut." Ridge stopped sweeping and turned to her. "Those puppies were just the beginning. You know that. How many more would suffer if nobody spoke up?" "But at what cost? I'm dragging you and Leona down with me. The whole town's turning against us." "Not the whole town." Ridge's voice was firm. "The truth has a cost, but lies cost more in the end. You taught me that." Hollis looked at their wall of evidence: lab reports, water samples, tissue analysis, incident patterns. The truth was there in stark chemical formulas and elevated toxin levels. No amount of intimidation could change those facts. "We need to protect this proof," she said finally. "All of it. If they can't stop us legally, they might try other methods." They worked through the night, scanning documents, creating backup drives, storing copies in secure locations. Each piece of evidence felt like a brick in a wall of truth they were building against Runnell's empire of lies. Dawn found them exhausted but determined. The lab results weren't just numbers anymore. They were a weapon in their fight for justice. Every attempt to silence them only proved how dangerous their discovery was to those in power. "Whatever comes next," Ridge said as they watched the sunrise paint the vandalized clinic walls, "we face it together." Hollis nodded, feeling the weight of both the evidence and the growing opposition. The truth about those banned chemicals was out now, and no amount of pressure could make her pretend she hadn't seen it. The real fight was just beginning. Hollis stared at her computer screen, reading the email for the third time. Her coffee grew cold beside her as the words sank in like poison. "This can't be right," she muttered, scrolling through Etta Monroe's formal retraction of the lab findings. The county scientist's carefully worded statement dismantled everything they'd discovered about the chemical contamination. Ridge leaned over her shoulder, his breath catching. "She's saying our sampling methods were flawed? That's nonsense. We followed every protocol." "Listen to this part," Hollis said, her voice tight. "Upon further analysis, the detected compounds fall within acceptable regulatory limits." That's not what she told us last week. She was certain about those results. The clinic felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls were closing in. Marigold whined from her recovery pen, where her surviving puppies struggled against their deformities. Their very existence contradicted Etta's new claims. "Runnell's got to her somehow," Ridge said, pacing the small office. "Has to be. Etta believed in our evidence. She walked us through every test result herself." Hollis picked up her phone, dialing Etta's number. It went straight to voicemail. She tried the county lab next, but the receptionist said Etta had taken a personal day. The timing wasn't lost on either of them. "I'm going to her house," Hollis decided, grabbing her keys. "Something's not right." Ridge insisted on driving. The autumn afternoon had turned gray and chilly, matching their mood. They found Etta's modest ranch house dark, except for a kitchen light. When Hollis knocked, there was a long pause before they heard movement inside. The door opened just enough to reveal Etta's face, more lined with worry than Hollis remembered. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "We need to understand," Hollis said, keeping her voice gentle despite her frustration. "Those test results were solid. You verified them yourself. Sometimes we see what we want to see." Etta's words sounded rehearsed, empty. Scientific review requires rigorous skepticism. This isn't skepticism, Ridge countered. This is a complete reversal. A car drove by slowly, and Etta flinched. That's when Hollis noticed the tremor in her hands, the shadows under her eyes. This wasn't just professional pressure. This was fear. Please, Hollis said softly. Let us help. Etta's composure cracked. She glanced up and down the street before opening the door wider. 5 minutes. That's all I can risk. Inside, the house felt cold despite the season. Family photos lined the walls. Etta with an older woman who shared her features, both smiling in happier times. Etta led them to the kitchen but remained standing, too anxious to sit. My sister Marion, she said, nodding toward one of the photos. She's been fighting lupus for years. The treatments are experimental, expensive. The insurance barely covers half. Understanding dawned on Hollis. Runnels threatened her care? Etta's hands clenched on the counter. 2 men came to see me yesterday. Very polite. Just wanted to remind me how generous the company's been with Marion's medical coverage. How unfortunate it would be if they had to scale back their community health programs. That's blackmail, Ridge growled. That's business. Etta's laugh was bitter. Marion's responding well to the new treatment. 6 more months could put her in remission. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't risk her life, not even for the truth. Hollis felt the weight of it, the impossible choice between professional integrity and personal loyalty. She thought of her own family, what she might do to protect them. We can find another way, she said. Other labs, independent testing. They'll trace it back, Etta interrupted. They always do. Runnels has people everywhere watching everything. Even this conversation. She moved to the window, checking the street again. Ridge pulled out his phone. I could call some contacts, get Marion into a different program. Stop. Etta's voice was firm now. You can't fix this. The best thing, the only thing, you can do is drop it. Save yourselves while you still can. You know we can't do that, Hollis said quietly. Then you're braver than I am. Etta's shoulders sagged. Or maybe just less vulnerable. I've spent my whole career defending scientific truth, but one threat to my sister and I. She pressed her hands to her face. I hate myself for it. Don't, Hollis moved closer, wanting to comfort but sensing Etta needed space. They're the ones who should be ashamed, using love against you like this. A car door slammed outside, Etta startled like a hunted animal. You need to leave. Now! Use the back door. As they hurried through the dark house, Hollis turned back. When this is over, when we expose everything, we'll make sure people know you were coerced, that you tried to do the right thing. Just protect yourselves, Etta whispered. They know where everyone's weak spots are. They'll use anything, everything, to keep their secrets. Outside, Ridge and Hollis walked several blocks before speaking, both processing what they'd learned. The street lamps were coming on, casting long shadows. We need to document everything, Ridge finally said. Every interaction, every threat. Build a case not just about the chemicals, but about their methods. Hollis nodded, thinking of Etta's fear, of Marion fighting for her life while being used as leverage. The corruption goes deeper than we thought. It's not just about money anymore. They're using people's love against them. Makes you wonder how many others they've silenced this way, Ridge mused. How many people are carrying secrets to protect someone they care about? The weight of it settled over them, the realization that they weren't just fighting chemical contamination, but a whole system designed to exploit human connection. Every ally could become a vulnerability. Every relationship could be turned into a weapon. But those same connections, Hollis realized, were also their strength. She thought of the community slowly building around their cause. Ridge's loyalty, Leona's determination, even Etta's reluctant truth. Love could be used to break people, but it could also make them brave. Hollis stared at the documents spread across her kitchen table, her coffee long gone cold. The late afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting harsh light on papers that told an even harsher truth. Her hands trembled as she reached for another file. "Look at these dates," Leona said, tapping a highlighted section. "The chemical disposal records line up perfectly with the land purchases. They knew exactly what they were doing." Ridge leaned over their shoulders, his normally calm face tight with anger. "They bought foreclosed farms at rock-bottom prices, then used them as dumping grounds. The evidence was overwhelming. Through careful investigation and help from anonymous sources, they'd pieced together Runnels's systematic approach. The company had targeted struggling farmers, pressuring them to sell during hard times. Then they'd used the abandoned properties for illegal chemical disposal, knowing the contamination would spread through groundwater to neighboring lands. "It wasn't just careless handling or accidents," Hollis said, her voice hollow. "They planned this. They chose places where people couldn't fight back." Leona nodded grimly, spreading out more documents. "The pattern goes back years. Look at these soil testing reports. They were monitoring the spread. They knew exactly how far the contamination would reach." The realization hit Hollis like a physical blow. The deformed puppies weren't just victims of negligence. They were evidence of a calculated strategy. Her mind flashed to Marigold, still recovering in the clinic, and the remaining puppy fighting for survival. "All those families who lost their farms," Ridge muttered. "All the animals that got sick. They watched it happen and did nothing." Hollis pushed back from the table, needing to move. She paced the kitchen, trying to process the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. It wasn't just about protecting a few animals anymore. This was about justice for an entire community that had been deliberately poisoned. "We need to change our approach," Leona said, her reporter's instincts kicking in. "We've been treating this like an environmental accident, but it's really about corporate crime, intentional harm." Ridge nodded slowly. "This is criminal conspiracy. We need more than just water samples and vet records." "We need to prove they knew." Hollis stopped pacing, her mind racing with possibilities. "Every internal memo, every land purchase, every chemical transport record, it all tells the story of deliberate action." Leona was already typing on her laptop. "I've got contacts at the county records office. We can track property transfers, compare them with disposal permits." "And I know some of those farmers who sold," Ridge added. "If we can prove they were pressured, show how Runnels targeted them specifically." Hollis felt a surge of energy, of purpose. The truth wasn't just shocking, it was clarifying. They weren't just investigating anymore. They were fighting back against something deliberately evil. "We need to protect our evidence," she said. "Everything we've gathered, everything we'll find. Runnels will do anything to bury this." "Already on it." Leona held up a flash drive. "Triple backed up, encrypted, stored in 3 different locations. They can't make this disappear." Ridge's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression darkening. "Speaking of disappearing, my contact at the county water board just got transferred, effective immediately." "They're clearing house," Leona said grimly. "Anyone who might help us is being moved or bought off." Hollis felt cold anger replacing her shock. She thought of Etta, forced to choose between truth and her sister's life. How many others had faced similar impossible choices? "We need to move faster," she said. "But we also need to be smarter. They're expecting us to go public with what we know, so we need to surprise them." "What are you thinking?" Ridge asked. Hollis walked back to the table, studying the pattern of evidence they'd gathered. "We build the case quietly, gather everything, organize it, make it bulletproof. But we don't just expose the contamination. We expose the whole system, the pressure tactics, the threats, the cover-ups." A complete picture. Leona nodded, understanding. Not just what they did, but how they got away with it for so long. And who they hurt, Ridge added softly. Every family, every farm, every animal. Make it personal. Hollis picked up a photo of Marigold and her surviving puppy. They thought they could target people who couldn't fight back. They thought money and threats could keep everyone quiet. She set the photo down firmly. They were wrong. The afternoon light was fading, but none of them moved to turn on the lights. They sat in the growing darkness, surrounded by evidence of deliberate cruelty, and planned their response. The truth had changed everything, not just what they knew, but who they needed to be to fight it. We're not just witnesses anymore, Hollis said into the quiet. We're not just gathering facts. This is about right and wrong, about standing up to people who think they can poison a community and get away with it. Leona's fingers flew over her keyboard, documenting everything. Ridge made calls to former farmers, his quiet voice steady and reassuring. And Hollis felt something crystallize inside her, a pure, burning certainty that this was a fight worth any cost. The deformed puppies weren't an accident. They were a warning, a sign of something deliberately evil that had been hidden for too long. But now they knew. And knowledge, Hollis realized, wasn't just power, it was responsibility. The next morning, Hollis carefully wrapped the tissue samples in protective packaging. Her hands were steady despite the weight of what they were about to do. Ridge watched from across the clinic, his presence reassuring. The federal lab contact confirmed they'll process these immediately, Leona said, checking her phone. My editor's cousin works there. They can't be bought off like the county facilities. Getting it there is the tricky part, Ridge said, moving closer to examine their improvised shipping container. Runnels probably has people watching the usual carriers. Hollis nodded. That's why we're not using the usual carriers. She pulled out a map, pointing to a route she'd marked. My cousin drives a produce truck. He's making a delivery run tomorrow that goes right past the lab. Smart, Leona approved, hidden in plain sight. They worked methodically, triple-checking the packaging. Each sample was labeled, photographed, and documented. No detail could be left to chance. Public opinion's starting to shift, Leona reported, showing them her latest article on her tablet. Comments are running 2-to-1 in support of the investigation. People are asking questions about other cases of animal deformities. Ridge's phone buzzed. 3 more farmers just agreed to talk. They've been sitting on stories about sick livestock for months, afraid to speak up. Hollis felt a surge of validation. The truth was finally breaking through the fear. We need to be ready when Runnels realizes he's losing control. He'll try something desperate. Already handled, Ridge said quietly. I've got friends installing security cameras at key locations. Any interference will be recorded. The afternoon brought unexpected allies. Dr. Martinez, a retired veterinarian from 2 counties over, arrived with his own records of suspicious cases. I've been watching what you're doing, he told Hollis. It's time someone stood up to these people. The validation from a respected colleague meant more than Hollis could express. She'd spent weeks doubting herself, fighting against whispers about her competence. Now other professionals were confirming her suspicions. We need to coordinate the public reveal carefully, Leona advised during their strategy session. Maximum impact, minimum chance for spin or interference. Ridge spread out a timeline on the table. Town council meeting next week. Full attendance, press coverage, perfect platform. And terrible optics if they try to shut us down, Leona agreed. We'll have backup copies of everything ready to distribute. Hollis studied the growing pile of evidence. Lab results, property records, health reports, witness statements, each piece telling part of a damning story. We need to make it personal, she said. Not just facts and figures, show them the real cost. I can help with that, Ridge said softly. He pulled out his phone, showing photos he'd taken of abandoned farms, sick animals, polluted streams. People need to see what's been happening in their own backyard. The team worked late into the evening, organizing their presentation. Leona crafted a narrative that would be impossible to ignore. Ridge coordinated with supporters who would attend the meeting. Hollis prepared her statement, knowing she would be the face of the confrontation. As darkness fell, Ridge found Hollis in the clinic, checking on Marigold and her surviving puppy. "You don't have to carry this alone," he said, standing close enough that she could feel his strength. "I know," she replied, grateful for his steady presence. "But I need to be the one to speak first. These animals trusted me. These people trusted me." Ridge nodded, understanding. "We'll be right there with you. All of us." The puppy stirred in its sleep, tiny legs twitching. Despite its deformities, it was fighting to live, to grow stronger. Hollis felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. "Runnels thought he could hide this forever," she said quietly. "He thought money and threats would keep everyone quiet, but he didn't count on people caring enough to fight back." "Or on you being too stubborn to give up," Ridge added with a slight smile. Hollis checked her phone, confirming the tissue samples were safely en route to the federal lab. Soon they would have unimpeachable proof to add to their case. The truth was gathering momentum, like a wave about to break. "We're ready for this," she said, more certain than ever. "Whatever happens at that council meeting, the truth is going to come out, all of it." Ridge's hand found hers, warm and reassuring. Together they watched the sleeping puppy, symbol of both corruption's cost and the determination to fight back. The time for gathering evidence was ending. The time for action was beginning. The town hall buzzed with nervous energy. Every seat was filled, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. Hollis sat at the presentation table, surrounded by stacks of evidence folders that represented months of careful investigation. 5 minutes, Leona whispered, adjusting her recorder. Reporters from 3 counties had shown up, their cameras ready. Ridge stood near the doorway, coordinating with farmers who'd agreed to testify. Dr. Martinez sat in the front row, his presence lending medical credibility to their case. The room hummed with whispered conversations and shuffling papers. When August Runnels strode in, flanked by his lawyers, the room fell silent. He carried himself with his usual confidence, but Hollis noticed tiny tells, a tighter jaw, slightly rushed movements. He knew something was coming. Mayor Thompson called the meeting to order, his gavel echoing. "We're here to address concerns about environmental contamination raised by Dr. Hollis Mercer and supporters. Dr. Mercer, you have the floor." Hollis stood, her hands steady as she connected her laptop to the projector. The first image filled the screen. Marigold's deformed puppies. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. 3 months ago, these puppies were born at my clinic, she began, her voice clear and strong. They represented my first glimpse of a pattern that extends far beyond one tragic case. She clicked through her presentation methodically. Satellite images showed contaminated drainage patterns. Charts tracked the increase in animal deformities. Soil sample results revealed toxic levels of banned chemicals. "The evidence is conclusive," she stated. "These compounds originate from illegal disposal sites on Runnels' chemical property. The company has known about this contamination for years." One of Runnels' lawyers stood to object, but Hollis was ready. She nodded to Ridge, who began distributing sealed packets to the council members. "You're holding certified lab results from 3 independent facilities," she explained, "along with sworn statements from former employees about illegal dumping practices." The council members leafed through the documents, their expressions growing darker. Mayor Thompson removed his glasses, rubbing his eyes. "There's more," Leona announced, standing. "The Herald is releasing a comprehensive investigation tomorrow, documenting similar cases across the region. Federal regulators have been notified and are launching a formal inquiry." Runnels's face had turned an alarming shade of red. He whispered urgently to his lawyers, who looked increasingly concerned. Dr. Martinez stepped forward next. "I've reviewed all veterinary evidence. These deformities show clear patterns consistent with chemical teratogen exposure. There is no other plausible explanation." More witnesses came forward. A dairy farmer described losing half his herd. A mother spoke about her children's unexplained rashes after swimming in the creek. Each testimony built upon the last, creating an undeniable picture of corporate negligence. The mood in the room shifted palpably. People who had doubted Hollis now nodded in agreement. Council members exchanged worried glances, aware that they could no longer ignore the situation. Runnels finally stood, attempting damage control. "These allegations are completely unfounded. We maintain the highest environmental standards." "We have satellite photos of your midnight dumping operations," Ridge interrupted, triggering another round of images on the screen. Time-stamped, GPS-tagged, and verified by environmental experts. The room erupted in angry murmurs. Phones came out as people recorded and shared the revelations in real time. Social media was already exploding with the story. Mayor Thompson had to bang his gavel repeatedly for order. "In light of this evidence, I am calling for an emergency council session to discuss immediate action. Mr. Runnels, I strongly advise you to cooperate fully with investigators." Runnels stormed out, leaving his lawyers to gather their papers. The crowd's energy had transformed from skepticism to outrage. Supporters surrounded Hollis, offering congratulations and sharing their own stories. "The EPA just confirmed they're sending a team," Leona announced, checking her phone. "They'll be here tomorrow morning, and 3 national news networks want interviews." Ridge made his way through the crowd to Hollis's side. "You did it. They can't sweep this under the rug anymore." "We did it," she corrected him, including everyone who had helped build the case. "This was never just about me or the puppies. It was about everyone who was afraid to speak up." The victory felt both enormous and fragile. Decades of environmental abuse had been exposed, but the real work of cleanup and accountability was just beginning. Still, looking at the energized crowd, Hollis felt the power of community action. People were comparing notes, organizing committees, planning next steps. Dr. Martinez shook her hand warmly. "You've done what many of us should have done years ago. You stood up and demanded the truth." The council chambers slowly emptied, but the conversations continued outside. People gathered in small groups, sharing information and contact details. The local diner announced it would stay open late to accommodate planning meetings. Back at the clinic, Hollis checked on Marigold and her surviving puppy. The little fighter was growing stronger every day, despite its challenges. Like the town itself, it had more resilience than anyone had guessed. "The Herald's website is crashing from traffic," Leona reported, showing her phone screen. "People are sharing the story nationwide. Environmental groups are pledging support." Ridge brought in coffee for everyone. "Local Farmers Association is calling an emergency meeting. They want to join the legal action as a group." The evidence they'd gathered sat in multiple secure locations now, protected from any potential retaliation. Their careful preparation had paid off, creating momentum that would be difficult to stop. "We should get some rest," Hollis suggested, knowing tomorrow would bring new challenges. "The EPA will need full access to everything we've documented." But she couldn't help smiling as she watched her team continue working, energized by their success. The truth had finally broken through, carried by the voices of people who refused to be silenced. Their coordinated offensive had worked better than they dared hope. The celebration at the clinic was cut short by the acrid smell of smoke. Hollis's nose twitched first, her years of farm experience making her instantly alert. Ridge noticed it too, his firefighter instincts kicking in as he moved toward the window. "Something's burning," he said, his voice tense. Through the darkness, an orange glow flickered behind the barn. "The animals!" Hollis was already running, her heart pounding against her ribs. The barn housed not just Marigold and her surviving puppy, but several recovering strays and injured wildlife. The smoke thickened as they approached. Through the haze, a figure darted away from the barn's side door. Even in the dim light, Hollis recognized Runnels's bulky silhouette. "He's lost his mind," Ridge muttered, pulling out his phone to call 911. Flames were already climbing the wooden walls, feeding on decades-old timber. The dry summer heat had turned the structure into perfect kindling. A terrified bark echoed from inside, followed by frightened animal noises. Hollis didn't hesitate. She yanked open the main door, choking as smoke billowed out. "Cover your mouth," Ridge called, rushing after her with his shirt pulled over his nose. Inside, the heat was overwhelming. Flames crawled up the walls like hungry orange fingers, consuming everything in their path. Cages lined both sides of the center aisle, and panicked animals created a cacophony of scared sounds. "Get the ones near the door," Hollis shouted, pushing deeper into the barn. She had to reach Marigold and her puppy, housed in the back corner for quiet recovery. Ridge worked quickly, releasing animals from their cages. Most bolted for the door as soon as they were freed. Through the smoke, Hollis could see Marigold's cage. The mother dog was barking frantically, trying to protect her weak puppy. A loud crack split the air. Hollis looked up to see burning rafters starting to give way. "Hollis, get out!" Ridge yelled, but she kept moving forward. She reached Marigold's cage just as a blazing beam crashed down behind her, blocking the main aisle. The heat was unbearable now, and breathing became harder with each passing second. Her fingers fumbled with the cage latch, finally springing it open. Marigold leaped out, but her puppy struggled to move, its deformed legs making escape difficult. Hollis scooped up the tiny creature, tucking it inside her jacket. The smoke was so thick she could barely see. "Ridge!" she called out, coughing violently. "Ridge! Over here!" His voice came from somewhere to her left. "There's a side door." Another beam fell, showering sparks everywhere. Hollis felt Marigold press against her legs, guiding her through the smoke. The mother dog's instincts were leading them to safety. They found Ridge at the side door, but it was jammed shut. The heat had warped the metal. Ridge threw his weight against it repeatedly while Hollis sheltered the puppy and tried to calm Marigold. The roof groaned ominously above them. Through gaps in the burning ceiling, Hollis could see the night sky, now clouded with smoke. The entire structure was moments from collapse. "Together!" Ridge shouted. They both slammed against the door, once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th try, it burst open. They tumbled out into the cool night air just as a deafening crash announced the roof's collapse. Hollis rolled away from the falling debris, protecting the puppy with her body. She felt Ridge's strong hands pulling her further from danger. In the distance, sirens wailed. When she finally caught her breath, Hollis checked the puppy. It was trembling but alive, pressing close to its mother who hadn't left their side. Ridge had scratches on his face and arms, and Hollis's clothes were singed, but they had all made it out. "He tried to kill them," Hollis said, her voice rough from smoke. "He tried to destroy the evidence." Ridge's expression was grim. He just added attempted murder to his charges. He pulled out his phone, which had somehow survived the chaos, and started recording the burning barn. More evidence. Fire trucks roared into the clinic's driveway, followed by police cars. The firefighters immediately began battling the blaze, but the barn was already a total loss. Sheriff Cooper strode toward them, notepad in hand. "We caught Runnels trying to leave town," he announced. "His car was packed for a quick getaway. Want to tell me what happened here?" Hollis held the puppy closer, feeling its tiny heart beating against her chest. "He thought he could silence us," she said. "He thought wrong." Hollis's hands shook as she unfolded the morning newspaper. Leona's headline blazed across the front page. "Chemical Corruption. The Truth Behind Runnels Agrochemical." Below it, damning photos showed illegal disposal sites and deformed animals, alongside charts from the federal lab analysis. The article was thorough, leaving no stone unturned. It detailed how Runnels had deliberately dumped banned chemicals, knowing they would seep into groundwater and affect local wildlife. Quotes from Etta Monroe, now free from threats, revealed the systematic pressure on county officials and the manipulation of test results. "I can hardly believe it's really happening," Hollis said, looking up at Ridge across her clinic's front desk. Her voice was still raspy from smoke inhalation, but her eyes were bright. Ridge nodded, pointing to a particular paragraph. "Look here. The EPA's emergency response team is already on site. They're containing the contaminated areas." The clinic's phone hadn't stopped ringing all morning. Other veterinarians from neighboring counties called to report similar cases they'd seen, but hadn't connected. Local farmers wanted their soil tested. Even former skeptics were reaching out to apologize and offer support. Leona burst through the door, her characteristic energy amplified by excitement. "They're arresting them right now," she announced, slightly out of breath. "The FBI just took Runnels and 3 county officials into custody. You should see it. There are news vans everywhere." Hollis felt a wave of emotion wash over her. After weeks of fighting, of being doubted and threatened, justice was finally moving forward. She walked to the recovery area where Marigold and her surviving puppy rested in a new enclosure. The puppy's deformities would always be a reminder of what unchecked corporate greed could do, but at least no more animals would suffer the same fate. "The federal prosecutor says it's an airtight case," Leona continued, pulling out her notebook. "Between the lab results, Etta's testimony, and the evidence of arson, Runnels is looking at serious time. The EPA's fines alone will bankrupt his company." Through the window, Hollis could see teams in hazmat suits working at the edge of town, setting up containment barriers around Runnels's property. The sight made everything feel more real. "The town council's holding an emergency meeting," Ridge added. "They're voting to revoke all of Runnels's business permits and freeze his local assets." A crowd had gathered outside the courthouse, visible from the clinic's front window. Among them, Hollis recognized faces that had once turned away when she tried to raise concerns. Now they held signs demanding accountability and justice. Etta Monroe appeared at the clinic's door, looking both tired and relieved. "I brought the original test results," she said, holding up a thick folder. "And documentation of every time they forced me to alter reports. The federal investigators want to talk to you both again." Hollis gestured for Etta to sit. The scientist's hands trembled slightly as she spread out the papers. "My sister's getting proper care now," she added quietly. "The FBI arranged it as part of my witness protection agreement." The evidence was overwhelming when laid out together. Soil samples, tissue analysis, years of falsified reports, and documentation of threats against anyone who questioned the company's practices. The federal lab's findings matched Hollis's initial suspicions exactly. The chemicals were not only present, but at levels far exceeding legal limits. "They found more dump sites," Leona said, scanning a new message on her phone. 3 counties over. The contamination zone is bigger than we thought." Ridge's phone buzzed with a text. "Sheriff Cooper says they're searching Runnels' office. Found shredded documents about payoffs to state officials. This goes higher than just the county level." The clinic's door chimed again. This time it was Mayor Thompson, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Dr. Mercer," he said formally. "The town council would like to formally apologize for not taking your concerns seriously. We are establishing an environmental safety committee, and we'd like you to chair it." Hollis felt tears welling up in her eyes. She thought about all the nights she'd laid awake, doubting herself, wondering if she was crazy to keep pushing when everyone told her to let it go. She thought about the barn fire, about how close they'd come to losing everything. "What matters now," she said, wiping her eyes, "is making sure this never happens again, to any animal, in any town." Through the window, she watched as FBI agents led Runnels out of his office in handcuffs. The man who had seemed so powerful, so untouchable just days ago, now looked small and defeated. His empire of corruption was crumbling, exposed by the very people he'd tried to silence. The evidence would ensure justice, real justice, not just for the animals who had suffered, but for every person who had been threatened, coerced, or forced into silence. The machinery of law was finally moving, grinding slow but inexorable toward truth. Marigold's puppy gave a small yip from its enclosure, drawing everyone's attention. Despite its challenges, it was growing stronger each day. Hollis walked over and gently stroked its head, feeling the warm weight of vindication in her chest. The truth had finally come to light, and with it, the chance for healing could begin. 3 months after Runnels's arrest, Hollis stood in front of the newly renovated barn. The fresh paint gleamed in the morning sun, and a hand-carved wooden sign hung above the entrance. Safe Haven Animal Sanctuary, a place of healing. The transformation was remarkable. Where there had once been scorched beams and collapsed walls, now stood a modern facility with special accommodations for animals recovering from environmental injuries. Local volunteers had pitched in to help rebuild, turning tragedy into triumph. "Looking good, isn't it?" Ridge's warm voice came from behind her. He wrapped his arms around her waist, and she leaned back against his solid presence. Their relationship had deepened through the crisis, forged in shared purpose and trust. What started as friendship had blossomed into something more, something real and lasting. "Better than I imagined," Hollis replied, watching as Marigold and her growing puppy played in the fenced yard. The puppy still had its challenges, but proper care and love had worked wonders. Its spirit remained unbroken, a living symbol of resilience. Inside the sanctuary, other rescued animals found refuge. A pair of cats discovered near another chemical dump site were recovering their strength. 3 horses, saved from contaminated pasture land, grazed in the new paddock. Each animal represented a small victory, a life reclaimed from neglect. "The grant money came through," Ridge said, pulling an official-looking letter from his pocket. "The State Environmental Fund approved full funding for the next 3 years." Hollis felt tears of joy well up. The sanctuary had started as a dream, her way of turning pain into purpose. Now it was real, supported by the very authorities who had once dismissed her concerns. The sound of tires on gravel drew their attention. Sarah Chen, the new county veterinarian, pulled up in her truck. She'd been a strong ally since taking over, helping establish proper protocols for identifying and treating environmentally affected animals. "Got room for 2 more?" Sarah called out, gesturing to her truck bed where 2 dogs huddled together. "Found them near that old factory site they're cleaning up." "There's always room," Hollis answered firmly. She and Ridge moved to help, their movements synchronized from months of working together. As they guided the nervous dogs into the intake area, Hollis noticed how they relaxed at her gentle touch. The sanctuary's examination room was state-of-the-art now, funded by donations and grants. Local schools brought students for educational tours, learning about environmental responsibility through the animals' stories. Even former skeptics had become supporters, impressed by Hollis's dedication and expertise. "Remember when people said you were making too much fuss?" Ridge asked later, as they sat together on the porch swing, watching the sunset. "Now they're calling you the town hero." Hollis smiled, thinking of how far they'd come. The town council meetings where she'd once been dismissed were now forums for positive change. Her input was sought after, her experience valued, but more importantly, animals that might have suffered in silence now had a voice. And a champion. "We're heroes," she corrected him, squeezing his hand. Their love had grown naturally, built on shared values and mutual respect. Ridge's steady strength had been her anchor through the darkest days, and now he was her partner in every sense. From the barn came the happy sounds of animals settling in for the night. Marigold's puppy, now nearly grown, gave a contented bark. Despite its physical challenges, it had become the sanctuary's unofficial greeter, showing new arrivals that healing was possible. The sanctuary represented everything Hollis had fought for. Not just justice, but healing. Not just exposure of wrong, but creation of right. Each animal that found safety here was proof that one person's determination could make a real difference. As twilight deepened into evening, Hollis and Ridge walked hand in hand through the sanctuary, checking on their charges one last time. The animals' trust in them was evident. Even the newest arrivals sensed they were finally safe. "You know what?" Ridge said softly, pulling her close. "I think we found our own sanctuary, too." Hollis nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. In fighting for these vulnerable creatures, they had built something precious for themselves as well, a partnership based on shared purpose and deep love. The night was peaceful, filled with the gentle sounds of contented animals and whispered promises of tomorrow. Here, in this place of healing, Hollis had found her true calling and her true love. The battle that had seemed so overwhelming had led to victory, sweeter than she could have imagined. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sanctuary's grounds as Hollis sat in her favorite spot, a weathered wooden bench beneath an old maple tree. In her arms, she cradled Max, the strongest of Marigold's surviving puppies. Though his body still bore the marks of his difficult beginning, his eyes sparkled with life and joy. "You're getting so big," she whispered, running her fingers through his soft fur. Max responded by nuzzling closer, his tail wagging contentedly. Despite his physical challenges, he had grown into a happy, affectionate dog who brought smiles to everyone who visited the sanctuary. The sound of footsteps on gravel made her look up. Ridge was walking toward them, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. His presence had become such a natural part of her life now, as essential as breathing. He handed her a mug and settled beside her on the bench. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "Just thinking about how far we've come," Hollis replied, shifting Max so she could accept the coffee. "Remember when he was so tiny we weren't sure he'd make it through the night?" Ridge nodded, reaching over to scratch behind Max's ears. "Look at him now, strong as they come, in his own way." Around them, the sanctuary hummed with life. What had started as an emergency shelter for Marigold and her puppies had grown into a haven for dozens of animals affected by environmental negligence. The old barn had been renovated, with modern medical facilities and comfortable recovery spaces. New fencing enclosed spacious exercise areas, and volunteers came regularly to help with the increasing workload. "The vet students are coming tomorrow," Hollis mentioned, watching as Marigold played with some younger dogs in the yard. "They want to learn more about identifying chemical exposure symptoms in animals." "From town pariah to teaching the next generation," Ridge said with pride in his voice. "You've changed everything, Hollis." She shook her head, thinking of all the people who had stood with her. "We changed everything. I couldn't have done it alone." Max squirmed in her lap, asking to be let down. They watched as he trotted over to greet a volunteer who was arriving for the evening shift. Despite his slightly awkward gait, he moved with confidence, his friendly personality shining through. "The town council asked if I'd speak at next month's Environmental Awareness Summit," Hollis said, leaning against Ridge's shoulder. "They want to use our story as an example of why proper oversight matters." "Quite a change from when they tried to shut you down," Ridge observed, wrapping an arm around her. The memory of those difficult days still stung, but the pain had faded. In its place was a deep satisfaction, not just in seeing justice served, but in witnessing the positive changes that had followed. Runnels's company had been forced to clean up their contaminated sites, and new regulations were being enforced with real vigor. More importantly, people's attitudes had shifted. The community that had once viewed her with suspicion now brought their concerns to her, trusting her judgment and expertise. Local farmers consulted her about water safety, and school groups toured the sanctuary to learn about environmental responsibility. Max returned to them, carrying his favorite toy, a well-loved rope bone. Ridge took one end, while Max playfully tugged on the other, his whole body wiggling with excitement. "You know," Ridge said as they played, "he's not just a survivor anymore, he's thriving." Hollis watched them, her heart full. Max had become more than just a rescued animal. He was a symbol of everything they'd fought for. His joy in simple pleasures, his ability to trust despite early trauma, and his determination to live life fully despite his limitations were daily reminders that healing was possible. "The new treatment protocol is working well," she noted, thinking of the other animals in their care. "Dr. Chen says our recovery rates are setting new standards." The mention of success rates brought to mind how far they'd come from those first desperate days with the newborn puppies. The knowledge they'd gained through that crisis now helped other animals, creating a ripple effect of positive change. Max settled at their feet, contentedly chewing his toy. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, creating a peaceful backdrop to the sanctuary's evening routines. Volunteers moved efficiently through their tasks, feeding and caring for the animals with gentle competence. Ridge squeezed her hand. "You've built something amazing here, Hollis, something that matters." She looked around at the sanctuary, at the healthy animals, the dedicated volunteers, the state-of-the-art facilities that had replaced the makeshift arrangements of those early days. But most of all, she looked at Max, who represented everything she'd fought for: the right of every creature to live free from harm, the power of determination and love to overcome adversity, and the importance of standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. "We built it together," she corrected him, reaching down to stroke Max's fur. "All of us, including this brave boy right here." The puppy looked up at her with complete trust, his tail thumping against the ground. In his eyes, she saw no trace of the trauma of his birth, only love and contentment. He had moved beyond mere survival to embrace life fully, becoming not just a success story, but a source of inspiration for everyone who met him. As the evening settled around them, Hollis felt a deep sense of peace. The battle that had seemed so overwhelming had led to victory sweeter than she could have imagined. Not just the legal victory against those who would harm the helpless, but the deeper triumph of creating something positive from adversity. Max rolled over for a belly rub, his absolute trust in them evident in every movement. As Hollis obliged him, she reflected on how this one small life had changed everything, had given her the courage to fight, the strength to persevere, and ultimately, the joy of seeing justice and healing prevail.